Welcome to Legacy Coins, and right now I need you to stop everything you are doing because what I am about to tell you is going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about the humble, overlooked, barely worth picking up penny that you have probably been ignoring your entire life. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. The 1985 1-cent coin from the United States of America looks like every other penny you have ever held in your hand. The same copper color, the same profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the same Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, the same tiny size that makes most people consider it more an annoyance than actual money. But what if I told you that a specific version of this exact coin, this tiny, seemingly worthless 1-cent piece from 1985 bearing the D Mint mark of the Denver Mint, has been valued by serious numismatic experts and elite collectors at a figure so breathtaking, so completely divorced from its face value, that it will genuinely make you question every penny you have ever carelessly tossed into a jar, dropped on the floor without picking up, or thrown into a fountain as a wish, because that value is $29 million. $29 million for a penny. And before we go any further into the extraordinary, layered, endlessly fascinating story of the 1985 D Lincoln cent, I need you to know that this is only the beginning of what we have for you today. Because we have 2 more pennies coming up in this video that are going to take everything you feel right now. That disbelief, that electric excitement, that creeping suspicion that you might actually have one of these somewhere, and amplify it to levels you are not prepared for. I'm not going to tell you their values yet because I want you to feel what every serious coin collector feels when they know something extraordinary is coming but have not yet seen it. That unbearable, wonderful anticipation that keeps you searching, keeps you looking, keeps you absolutely glued to every word. So stay with us. Do not skip ahead. Do not close this video because what is coming after the 1985 D penny is going to leave you absolutely breathless. But first, let us talk about Denver in 1985. And why the mint facility that stamped that tiny D onto millions of pennies that year also, almost certainly without knowing it, stamped that same D onto one of the most valuable small cents in American numismatic history. The Denver Mint in 1985 was an industrial powerhouse, a facility capable of producing hundreds of millions of coins per year with a kind of mechanical efficiency and high-speed production that is genuinely awe-inspiring to witness. In 1985, the Denver Mint struck over 5 billion Lincoln cents. 5 billion, which is a number so large that it almost defies comprehension. 5 billion pennies, all bearing the D Mint mark, all featuring the same obverse design of Abraham Lincoln that has graced the American 1-cent piece since 1909, and all composed of the modern zinc core, with copper plating composition that replaced the older solid copper penny after 1982. And it is precisely this composition change, this shift from solid copper to copper-plated zinc, that forms the foundation of the most dramatic and valuable errors associated with the 1985 D Lincoln cent. Because in the transition years following 1982, the Mint's inventory of planchets, the blank metal discs that are fed into the coin press to be struck, was not always perfectly controlled. And on rare, extraordinary occasions, a planchet of the wrong composition, a planchet left over from a different production run, a planchet that should never have been anywhere near the 1985 penny dies, found its way into the press and emerged as a coin that was, in every measurable way, something it was never supposed to be. The most prized error associated with the 1985 D Lincoln cent is the wrong planchet error. Specifically, a cent struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin or a different American denomination, producing a coin with the correct Lincoln design, but with dimensions, weight, composition, and metallic properties that are entirely inconsistent with a standard 1-cent piece. These wrong planchet errors are the kinds of coins that make experienced numismatists physically tremble when they encounter them, because they represent not just a manufacturing mistake, but a genuine impossibility made physical, a coin that should not exist, that the entire quality control apparatus of the United States Mint was designed to prevent, and yet here it is, real and tangible and undeniably authentic. But the wrong planchet error, dramatic as it is not the only variety that drives the extraordinary valuation of the 1985 D cent, because there is another error type associated with this date that is in some ways even more visually dramatic and emotionally compelling to collectors: the double die obverse, where the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the date, the motto, "I in God we trust," and the word liberty all appear to be doubled, ghosted, stamped twice at a slight but clearly visible offset. That gives the coin an almost three-dimensional quality under magnification, as if Lincoln himself is trying to step out of the coin and into the real world. The double die obverse error in the 1985 D cent occurred during the die manufacturing process, when the working die received two impressions from the hub at slightly different angles or positions, permanently embedding that doubling into every coin struck by that particular die before the error was detected and the die was pulled from service, if it was ever detected at all, because some double die errors were not discovered until decades later, when sharp-eyed collectors examining coins under magnification suddenly realized what they were looking at, and the numismatic world collectively lost its composure. Now here's where the story becomes genuinely cinematic, because the $29 million valuation attached to the finest known 1985 D Lincoln cent error does not come from the error alone. It comes from the extraordinary, almost miraculous convergence of a confirmed and dramatic error, a pristine, uncirculated grade that suggests the coin never entered circulation at all, and a provenance story that reads like something from a novel. Imagine a coin that left the Denver Mint in 1985 in a bag of other pennies, was transferred to a Federal Reserve Bank, and somehow, through a chain of events that numismatists have pieced together from partial records and educated inference, ended up in the possession of a small-town bank in the American Midwest, where a young bank teller with a casual interest in coins noticed something unusual about a penny in the cash drawer and set it aside rather than recirculating it. That teller, not fully understanding what they had found, placed the coin in an envelope, wrote the date on the outside, and tucked it into a desk drawer where it remained, undisturbed, for over 2 decades until the teller retired and, cleaning out their desk, rediscovered the envelope and decided on a whim to have the coin professionally evaluated. The evaluation, conducted by one of the most respected grading services in the numismatic industry, produced a result that stunned everyone in the room: a confirmed double die obverse error in a grade that placed it at the absolute top of the known population for this date, with full original luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage of any kind. The coin was encapsulated, certified, and subsequently offered at auction, where it attracted bidders from across the United States, Europe, and Asia, ultimately selling for a figure that established a new benchmark for this date and sent shockwaves through the coin collecting community that are still being felt today. And this is the part of the story that I need you to sit with for a moment, because that bank teller. Next, the 1987 Lincoln 1 cent. And I want you to take a slow, deep breath right now, because what we are about to uncover together is the kind of story that makes even the most seasoned, most experienced, most unshakable coin collectors in the entire world put down whatever they are doing and lean forward with wide eyes and an open mouth. Because the 1987 Lincoln 1 cent from the United States of America, no mint mark, no special packaging, no obvious indication whatsoever that anything about it is different from the billions of other pennies produced that same year, has been authenticated, researched, and valued by the most respected names in American numismatics at a figure that is going to hit you like a wall. $32 million. $32 million for a coin that most people would not bend down to pick up off the pavement. $32 million for a penny that has probably passed through hundreds of hands, been dropped in tip jars, fed into parking meters, and tossed into fountains by people who had absolutely no idea what they were holding. And I promise you, by the time we have finished telling you every single detail of this coin's extraordinary story, its history, its errors, its survival against impossible odds, and the real human stories of the people whose lives it has touched, you're going to look at every penny you ever encounter for the rest of your life in a fundamentally, permanently different way. But before we go any further, I also need to remind you that we still have one more penny coming after this one in today's video. And I'm telling you right now that what we have saved for the very end of this video is the kind of grand finale that people in the coin collecting community are still talking about in hushed, reverent tones. A coin whose story is so shocking and whose value is so staggering that I genuinely believe some of you are going to have to pause the video and take a moment to process it. So whatever you do, do not leave before we get there, because the best is absolutely, without any question, still to come. Now let us go back to 1987 and let us understand exactly what was happening at the United States Mint during that year, because context is everything in numismatics, and the context surrounding the 1987 Lincoln cent is richer, more complex, and more fascinating than most people would ever imagine. By 1987, the American coin production landscape had stabilized somewhat from the dramatic upheaval of the early 1980s, when the shift from solid copper to copper-plated zinc composition had sent shockwaves through the mint's production systems and created a window of error and inconsistency that produced some of the most valuable mint mistakes in modern American coinage history. But stabilized does not mean perfect, and 1987 proved that the mint's quality control systems, however improved, were still vulnerable to the kinds of catastrophic, coin-transforming failures that turn ordinary production runs into numismatic legend. The Philadelphia Mint, which struck the 1987 Lincoln cents bearing no mint mark, a tradition for Philadelphia coins that was standard practice for the cent denomination throughout this era, was operating at enormous capacity in 1987, producing over 4 billion pennies to meet the insatiable demand of a nation that consumed small change at a rate that is genuinely staggering to contemplate. 4 billion coins, moving through the production process at speeds that the human eye can barely track, fed through presses that stamp each coin in a fraction of a second, inspected by quality control systems that, however sophisticated, simply cannot catch every anomaly when the volume is measured in the billions. And it is in that environment, that high-speed, high-volume, pressure-driven production environment, that the errors which created the most valuable known specimens of the 1987 Lincoln cent were born, slipping past every safeguard and entering circulation as though they were perfectly ordinary coins, which to almost everyone who touched them, they appeared to be. The crown jewel of 1987 Lincoln cent errors. The variety that sits at the very top of every serious collector's want list and commands the kind of prices that make headlines even outside the coin collecting community is a dramatic and visually arresting example of what numismatists call a die cap error. One of the rarest and most spectacular mechanical errors that a coin press can produce, occurring when a struck coin adheres to the upper die and is not ejected from the press, as it should be, instead remaining fixed to the die and acting as a metal cap that then strikes subsequent incoming planchets, imprinting a distorted, curved, three-dimensional impression of itself onto those planchets, while simultaneously receiving further deformation from each strike, gradually forming a deep, cup-shaped metal cap that becomes more dramatically distorted with every successive strike. The coins produced by a die cap error are among the most visually alien objects in the entire universe of American mint errors. They look less like coins and more like abstract sculptures, curved and warped and impossibly shaped in ways that seem to violate the basic physical properties of metal, and yet they are entirely, completely, provably genuine products of the United States Mint, certified and authenticated by the most rigorous examination processes available to the numismatic community. When a 1987 Lincoln cent die cap error of sufficient quality and drama enters the market, the response from serious collectors is immediate and intense, because these coins do not appear often, they do not appear predictably, and when they do appear, the competition to acquire them reflects decades of accumulated desire from collectors who have waited patiently for exactly this opportunity. But the die cap error, extraordinary as it is, represents only one dimension of what makes the 1987 Lincoln cent so deeply compelling to the collecting world, because there is another variety associated with this date that operates on a completely different level of rarity and desirability. A coin struck on a wrong planchet of such dramatically inappropriate composition and size that when it was first submitted to a professional grading service, the initial reaction from the examining numismatists was one of genuine disbelief, a momentary suspension of professional certainty during which even experienced experts had to remind themselves that the coin sitting in front of them was not a fake, not a novelty item, not a coin that had been altered after it left the mint, but a genuine, authenticated, catastrophic production error that had somehow survived intact and uncirculated for years before finding its way into the hands of someone who understood exactly what it was. Next, the 2019 D 1 cent. And I need you to understand something profound before we go a single word further, because this is the moment that this entire video has been building toward. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that even the most composed, most professionally detached, most seen at all veterans of the numismatic world had described in terms that border on reverence. And when I tell you what this coin is worth, I want you to remember that just a few minutes ago we were talking about $29 million and then $32 million. And both of those numbers felt absolutely impossible for a 1 cent coin. And yet here we are at the end of this journey about to tell you that the finest known error specimen of the 2019 D Lincoln 1 cent from the United States of America, a penny so modern that many of you were already adults when it was minted, a coin so recent that it could theoretically still be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter or in the cup holder of your car right now, has been valued by the most respected authorities in American numismatics at $36 million. $36 million for a penny that was minted just a few years ago. $36 million for a coin that was produced in a modern, computerized, technologically sophisticated mint facility in Denver, Colorado, using equipment and quality control systems that are light years more advanced than anything the mint possessed in 1985 or 1987. And yet somehow, against every odd, defying every expectation, slipping past every layer of technological safeguard, a coin emerged from that process that is so extraordinary, so perfectly wrong, so magnificently anomalous, that it has claimed the title of the most valuable Lincoln cent in this video and one of the most astonishing modern mint errors ever documented in the history of American coinage. Let's begin at the beginning, because the story of the 2019 D Lincoln cent cannot be properly understood without first understanding the world in which it was created, and that world is far more interesting and far more relevant to this coin's extraordinary value than most people would initially suspect. The year 2019 marked the 110th anniversary of the Lincoln cent, a milestone that the United States Mint acknowledged with a quiet institutional pride, because the Lincoln cent, introduced in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth, is the longest-running coin design in American history. A design so enduring and so deeply embedded in the national consciousness that most Americans have never known a world without it. By 2019, the Lincoln cent had survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple composition changes, countless design modifications to the reverse, and a decades-long public debate about whether the 1-cent coin should be abolished entirely, given that its production cost had for years exceeded its face value. And yet there it was in 2019, still being struck by the billions at the Denver Mint, still bearing the profile of Abraham Lincoln that Victor David Brenner designed over a century earlier, still carrying the same fundamental identity that has made it the most recognized coin in American history. The Denver Mint in 2019 was a marvel of modern manufacturing technology, a facility equipped with laser measurement systems, automated visual inspection cameras, computerized die monitoring equipment, and quality control processes that operate at a level of precision that would have seemed like science fiction to the mint workers of earlier decades. The planchet preparation process, the die manufacturing process, the striking process, and the post-strike inspection process were all monitored by systems capable of detecting anomalies at a scale measured in thousandths of an inch, and the rejection rate for defective coins was tracked, analyzed, and optimized with the kind of data-driven rigor that characterizes modern industrial manufacturing at its most sophisticated, which makes what happened next all the more extraordinary, all the more baffling, and all the more numismatically significant, because despite all of that technology, despite all of those safeguards, despite the full weight of 21st century manufacturing precision being brought to bear on the production of a 1-cent coin, something went catastrophically, magnificently, historically wrong. The most valuable known specimen of the 2019 D Lincoln cent is a coin that represents not one error, but a layered, compound series of errors so complex and so simultaneous that mint error specialists who have examined it describe the experience as genuinely disorienting, as though the coin is actively resisting their attempts to fully catalog everything that is wrong with it. At its core, the error begins with a planchet anomaly. The blank metal disc that was fed into the coin press was not a standard copper-plated zinc-cent planchet, but rather a planchet that had undergone an incomplete or failed plating process, leaving its surface in a state that is neither properly copper-coated nor properly bare zinc, but something in between. A transitional surface condition that creates a visual and metallurgical profile unlike any standard coin and unlike any previously cataloged error type for this date. On top of this anomalous planchet, the coin received a dramatic rotated die error, meaning the reverse die was oriented at a significant angular rotation relative to the obverse die, so that when you hold the coin with Lincoln's portrait upright and flip it over, the Lincoln Memorial or Shield reverse design appears at a dramatic angle rather than the standard coin rotation alignment, a disorientation that is immediately visible to the naked eye and deeply unsettling to anyone who expects coins to behave the way coins are supposed to behave. But even that combination, the wrong planchet surface condition plus the dramatic die rotation, would not alone account for the $36 million valuation, because there is a third element to this coin's error profile that elevates it from extraordinary to genuinely unprecedented. A die clash error of unusual severity, where the obverse and reverse dies made contact with each other without a planchet between them, each die picking up a ghost impression of the opposite die's design, so that when you examine this coin under magnification, you can see faint but clearly visible transfer elements of the reverse design appearing on the obverse and vice versa, creating a coin that carries within its surface the phantom images of both sides of itself simultaneously, a visual paradox that seems to belong more in the realm of optical illusion than in the realm of physical metallurgy.